Look at this book, The Puppeteers. You cannot forget the title of The Puppeteers, and we will say it 7 times. It's by Jason Chaffetz, who's now with Fox News. And Jason, of course, used to chair the House Oversight Committee. And Jason is taller than you think. That's the first thing I realized when Jason walked in the green room and told me he had a new book out. Jason Chaffetz, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Good to have you. How tall are you, Jason?
I'm 7'7".
I thought so.
I'm sorry, I meant 6'2". That's what I meant to say. Pardon me.
Well, you're very tall, and I love the Puppeteers. I have 13 things to ask you in 13 minutes. We're going to move fast.
Okay.
The Puppeteers, the people who control America, is very depressing stuff. It seems like an endless list in this book of absurd attacks on the central assumptions of American life. At the end of writing The Puppeteers, are you as depressed as I was at the end of reading it?
Yeah, no, it scared me. It scared me because I didn't realize the depth of the problem, that it was trillions upon trillions of dollars. And it's not something you can just flip the switch and fix. But if you do, well, I feel like we're fighting all the wrong fights. This is where the fight is, and it's where these leftists have been for a long time.
You know, Jason, you've got to say the title, The Puppeteers, in every answer if you want people. It's the Luntz rule. If you don't say The Puppeteers 7 times, no one will. So you say, yeah, The Puppeteers depressed me. I'm honest to goodness, I'm always coaching. Number 2, I want to start with January Littlejohn and her 13-year-old in Leon County schools. I cannot believe that story. Do you want to tell people about it?
Well, the problem is that you have schools that have been manipulated to the point where they cannot, these puppeteers, they believe in what are a new term that we're going to have to get used to called community schools. And the idea of community schools is that they take care of your child from top to bottom. Everything from what haircut they get to what they wear to what the meals they have. And so when somebody wants to maybe push this child to go get a gender, change their gender, these people were not even informed. The parents didn't even know what was going on.
And they were sympathetic parents. They wanted to help their daughter who was undergoing gender confusion, but they were worried about it being contagion because 3 of her friends had done this thing. And so they tell her teacher, be aware, and they're willing to go along with a name change. And then the parents the school sucks her into a different track. It's unbelievable.
No, and again, I think it's a bigger concerted effort. It's not just an isolated case that we highlight here. There is this move for these community schools to take your child and essentially run their entire lives, not just educate them on math, reading, and arithmetic. That's why I wrote The Puppeteers.
There you go. Bingo. Okay. Now that brings me to Randy Weingarten in The Puppeteers, because she may be the biggest puppeteer of all. You lay out her role in keeping the schools closed. We are on a vast re-education campaign right now to erase that. The Puppeteers is stopping that. Do you think she will succeed in preventing the public from remembering who got the schools closed and who kept them closed?
That's up to us. That's why you write a book like The Puppeteers, is because you want to make sure it's documented. Look, she has some $300 million at her disposal. We talk about there's some good work with Peter Schweitzer's group, the Government Accountability Institute, good research about how they've morphed and changed into a political operation, not something that's just out there helping their teachers. But they are trying to rewrite history. And we also tell some interesting stories about her ties to Hunter Biden and how some of the cronies from Rosemont, Seneca, or one of the offshoots of that, went out and, teachers' unions spent $3 million getting these personal protective equipment out of China that ended up being, fake and bogus. But again, you can see how incestuous it is over there.
Now I will come back to the PatCon chapter in The Puppeteers. I do want to talk about the FBI and parents. Now, Christopher Wray, this is not in The Puppeteers, but you're here. Christopher Wray has refused to turn over a document. You were in Jim Comer's position, right? There's a picture of Jim Comer. You know what a subpoena is. Does he have any leg to stand on in turning down the subpoena that he's been given for documents?
No, it's an unclassified document, a duly issued subpoena that should be an open and shut case. The problem is, and Trey Gowdy and I would talk about this a lot, is your ability to enforce a subpoena. That's the strength of your subpoena. How good can you enforce it? And the problem is you have to then go to the Department of Justice to enforce a subpoena on the Department of Justice. So until Congress figures out how to fight for itself and stand up as a co-equal branch of government, guess what? Not going to happen.
Well, they now need to hold Chris Wray in contempt, which is unfortunate. I've only heard good things about him, but this is unacceptable from a constitutional point of view. Jason Chaffetz, in The Puppeteers, you write about PatCon. And I know a little bit about the FBI, I know a little bit about the Church Committee, I know a little bit about all this different stuff. But I didn't realize that you believe they egged on the white supremacists in the Whitmer case. I didn't know that. Are you sure about that? Because I've never been persuaded that the FBI egged on the people who were going to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer.
No, I don't say that in the book. In The Puppeteers, I highlight this case. What's interesting to me about this is that usually if you go to a federal judge in Washington, D.C., they're pretty sympathetic to the D.C. machine. But Judge Waddups in Utah is just reading the law, and this case is still open, and it's a FOIA case. It's a Freedom of Information case. Do these people have the right to have this information? So you have this judge in Utah who believes that it should. I'm not trying to come to any conclusions whatsoever, but I think it's interesting that is our government going to be open and transparent? We're different in the world in that we are open and transparent. We are self-critical. But what's interesting and fascinating about this case is, where are the documents? Did this actually happen? Did it not happen? I don't come to any conclusions. I'm just saying we need the documentation.
Well, let's move on to something where you do have a conclusion. I agree with it. Secretary Mayorkas is a fiasco and a disaster. When you finished writing this book, you had fiscal year 2022, 3 million illegal entries in the United States. Fiscal year 2023 is going to be 4 million, Jason Chaffetz. And yet they're focused on white supremacy. I had Secretary Clinton on this show. Secretary Clinton said, at most, we have 600,000 white supremacists in the United States, and they're not all violent. They're all kind of nuts, but they're not all violent. The question is, why is he fixated on that and not on 4 million people about whom we know nothing entering into the United States?
There's a theme that kind of a thread that runs through the Puppeteers book, and that they need white supremacy in order to justify many of the things they would never be able to get and do as a power stroke in the federal government and through these non-government organizations and all of these slush funds that they create. I think one thing that's stunning about the book is we highlight by the hundreds of billions of dollars the slush funds that are at the disposal of the Democratic machine. So no matter who goes into office, no matter who gets elected, the bureaucratic machine continues on, and they have so much money. If you don't starve the beast, you don't solve the problem. And you start to see this thread here, and they have to have white supremacy out there in order to justify, hey, we've got to fight that at every level, every organization, everything. No doubt there's some white supremacy out there, but is it the number one thing facing our country right now? I don't think so.
No, I don't either. And I think you make that argument very good. You also make a lot of arguments in the Puppeteers about the ESG madness that we've entered into.
Yeah.
And thank goodness for state treasurers. You know, when Doug Ducey was state treasurer of Arizona, he wouldn't put up with this nonsense. They are costing billions and billions of dollars to people who depend on those pensions. And I just read about the Illinois state pension system in news items by John Ellis this weekend. They're already bankrupt, right? They're effectively bankrupt, and they're still wasting money on ESG, Jason Chaffetz. Thanks for that chapter in the Puppeteers.
Yeah, so in the Puppeteers, we highlight the idea that BlackRock, for instance, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street or Main Street, they control 75+% of the retirement funds and whatnot. If you look at the S&P 500, BlackRock alone, I think it's north of 97% of the S&P companies. BlackRock owns at least a 5% stake. And so you wonder, why are all of these companies pursuing ESG and DEI and all of these types of things? It's because BlackRock has an agenda. I mean, Larry Fink was just out there, you can find it on Twitter pretty easily, talking about how you have to manipulate these companies because they won't do it by themselves. These are the types of puppeteers. You know, in the Trump administration, Larry Kudlow was the economic advisor, right? And what happened when Joe Biden came on board? They brought in Brian Deese. Brian Deese worked in the Obama administration, but he's a climate activist. That's his background, and he's the economic advisor for Joe Biden. He left recently, but that's that this is their agenda. This is what they want to do. It's not about improving the economy or bringing up real wages. It's about getting these requirements into these companies, in the government, and everywhere. Those are the true puppeteers.
You know, I like your story about Uncle Joe and Wheezy. I really think that's very illustrative. But the ERISA law, I only did one ERISA case in all of my years. I never want to get near it again. I think you're illustrating to people that their pension funds, wherever they are in danger because the companies are beset by the Larry Finks and the ESG absolutists and this absurd idea of, quote, stakeholder capitalism. The only stakeholder in a publicly traded company is the shareholder. Everybody else is an alien to them. And you make that argument, Jason. Is it getting traction? There is no such thing as stakeholder capitalism. There's capitalism, and it's run by investors and people who take risks, not by people on the sidelines.
Well, I can tell you're passionate about this, but the puppeteers I highlight, we got our hands on a document that nobody had seen before. It's put out by the Democrats Association, and what they do is they are selling for $50,000 or $100,000 a seat. Come meet with your state financial officer that's a Democrat or the state treasurer, and then they list out what they control. The Democrats have under their control more than $1 trillion that they use from these investment funds. So if you're a retired teacher, a retired employee, a government employee in these states like California, I think it's close to $750 billion that they can invest. Well, they take these proxy votes and go into these companies to manipulate them. So you look at your company and say, hey, why are they doing all this crazy stuff? It's because of the proxy voting that's happening.
It's because of the puppeteers. Jason Chaffetz, last question. If Senator Romney doesn't run for re-election, are you running?
I'm thinking about it. I am thinking about it. I haven't figured out. I don't know. I love what I'm doing.
Come on, just say yes. If he retires, I'm going. Just say yes, Jason.
Oh, look at the time, Hugh. Thanks for the time to talk about the puppeteers.
Jason Chaffetz, congratulations on the Puppeteers.